Imagine this. You are a father. It is Tuesday evening. You have just sat down for dinner at your daughter's house. Her husband cooked the meal. He served the food. He made conversation. He put the grandchildren to bed. Everything felt normal, except for a feeling you could not shake, a quiet, crawling wrongness that you could not explain, but could not ignore. So while the house is still, you go downstairs, you open a door, you lift the lid of a black bin bag on the laundry room floor, and what you find inside destroys every version of the world you thought you were living in. That is not a horror film. That is Tuesday the 13th of February, 2024, in a quiet, semi-detached house in Switzerland. And this is the story of the woman inside that bag, a woman who deserved far better than the way her life ended, and far better than the way this world tried to forget her. Welcome to Cold Tape Stories, where we uncover the cases that time nearly forgot. Let's take a closer look at what really happened. Her name was Kristina Joksimovic. Born on the 15th of April 1985, she grew up in a small Swiss town with a relatively stable home life and an early passion for sport. Everyone who knew her described her the same way, every time, without hesitation. Beautiful inside and out, not just in appearance, but in the way she moved through the world, the way she made people feel when they were around her. In 2003, at just 18 years old, Kristina won a regional beauty title. 4 years later, in 2007, she earned her place among just 16 finalists for Miss Switzerland. She didn't take the crown, but that experience planted something in her. She watched the machinery of it all, the posture, the poise, the precise way a woman could command a room simply by the way she moved, and she understood it better than most. That same year, 2007, Kristina founded a business. She called it Catwalk Coach. She trained models, pageant contestants, and businesswomen. She taught them how to walk a runway, how to move in heels, how to carry themselves with purpose. Over the next 15 years, she became one of the most respected catwalk coaches in all of Switzerland. She even worked directly inside the Miss Switzerland organization, mentoring the very contestants who competed for the title she once chased herself. In 2024, Kristina was 38 years old. She was living with her young family in that semi-detached house in the same town where she had been born. She had a career she had built from nothing. She had 2 daughters, one born in 2020, another born in 2021, who were by all accounts her entire world. And in mid-January of 2024, Kristina had posted photographs online from a winter break with her husband, smiling, together, everything looking exactly as it should. They were the last photographs she ever posted. In 2017, Kristina married a Swiss businessman named Marc Rieben. He was an entrepreneur, a father, a man who volunteered with a local scout group on weekends. Neighbors called him the ideal husband in a perfect family. His public image was consistent, unremarkable, and clean. But that image had cracks in it, and some of those cracks ran very deep. Before Kristina, before the scout group and the suburban house and the 2 little girls, Marc had been in another relationship, and in 2016, his former partner reported that he had been repeatedly violent with her. He had once driven his car over her foot. He would hit her during arguments, push her against walls, strangle her, his hands around her throat. No conviction ever followed. No criminal record was ever created. The file was closed and life moved on. Kristina fell for him hard. One close friend described it as falling head over heels from the very beginning. But another long-time friend had been unsettled from the start. She said Marc simply didn't suit Kristina. He was arrogant, she said, critical, almost too introverted, a different energy entirely from the warm, generous woman who had built her career on making others feel confident and capable. After their 2 daughters were born, the marriage began to come apart. The couple drifted. They tried counseling. Marc eventually refused to continue. And as the distance between them grew, so did something far more dangerous than silence. Marc became controlling over the children, over the household, over Kristina herself. Friends noticed the decline accelerating through 2022. Marc would later acknowledge that year as the turning point, though he placed the blame squarely on his wife, claiming her behavior had changed. What he failed to mention is that by this point, Kristina had begun secretly recording their conversations because she no longer felt safe in her own home. She was right not to feel safe. On the 14th of July 2023, police were called to the family home. Marc had assaulted Kristina. The photographs taken that day showed ligature marks around her neck, the bruising left behind after being choked by human hands. In August of 2023, Kristina recorded a conversation in which she told Marc that she wanted to separate. She framed it around the children. Her decision was settled. Her path was chosen. She wanted out, and she wanted her daughters. Marc opposed the divorce entirely. He demanded permanent custody of both girls. He refused any financial support. In his own words, he said he was afraid of losing the children, the house, the business he had built. And when a man like Marc is afraid, history had already shown what that fear could do. If you're still watching at this point, and I need to know who is here for this, drop a comment right now and type, "I'm still watching," because what comes next is not easy to say, and it was not easy to live through for the people who loved Kristina. Let's keep going. Tuesday, the 13th of February, 2024, the day before Valentine's Day. Kristina's 2 daughters were at daycare. The house was quiet, and then it wasn't. That morning, another argument erupted between Kristina and Marc. It ended with him hitting her in the face. She drove him out of the house and told him firmly and finally that he had to leave, for good this time. Despite everything that had happened that morning, the 2 agreed to meet at midday to discuss the terms of their separation once and for all. Kristina went into that meeting wanting to be fair but firm. She wanted the split, and she wanted the children. Marc went into that meeting already having made a decision. He knew what she was going to say, and he had decided somewhere between that morning and midday that he was not going to allow it. When he arrived at the house, he had one thing on his mind. Whether any words were ever exchanged at all remains unclear. What is clear is that the assault began with a punch to the face, then more punches. He pulled her hair hard, enough the forensic evidence would later confirm, to tear it from her scalp in clumps. He grabbed her by the throat and forced her up against the wall. He choked her there with his bare hands until she lost consciousness. And then, while she was unconscious, he searched the house for something to finish it. He found what investigators would describe as a band-shaped ligature. Some accounts suggest a ribbon, others closer to string or cord. Whatever it was, he wrapped it around her neck and tightened it. He strangled her until he was certain she would never wake up again. It was approximately 1 p.m. in the afternoon. The assault had lasted close to an hour. Kristina did not die quickly. He carried her body downstairs to the laundry room. What followed over the next 3 hours is among the most disturbing things this channel has ever documented. Using ordinary household and garden tools, garden shears, kitchen knives, and a jigsaw typically used for cutting wood, He dismembered his wife's body. He reduced her remains to smaller, more manageable pieces. But he didn't stop there. He used an industrial blender. He placed portions of her body into it and liquefied what he could. Then he mixed the remaining liquid with approximately 10 liters of disinfectant chemicals, bleach and similar substances, in what can only be described as a deliberate, methodical attempt to destroy the evidence of what he had done. During this process, investigators would later discover he was playing videos on his phone. He also did something else, something that speaks to a level of hatred and contempt
that defies ordinary understanding. He deliberately removed her uterus. When the investigation examined the digital evidence on his devices, evidence that took months to recover, in part because Marc refused to hand over his passwords, they found that he had researched human anatomy. He had looked up methods for disposing of a human body. This had not been a panic. This had been planned. The industrial blender had been purchased without any apparent household purpose. The volume of chemicals on hand was far beyond the ordinary. Prosecutors would later argue that he had begun preparing for this long before the 13th of February 2024. He put the remains into black bin bags and left them in the laundry room. Then he went back upstairs. While Marc was downstairs, the daycare had been calling. Nobody had come to collect the two little girls. Kristina's parents, her mother and father, eventually received the call and went to pick up both children themselves. They brought the girls straight to the family home. Marc answered the door. He said nothing unusual. He behaved as though it were any other evening. He invited his in-laws inside, and then, in an act of chilling domestic normalcy, he made them dinner. They sat at the table. They ate. They made conversation. The father and mother of Kristina Joksimovic sat just meters above what remained of their daughter, unaware that she was in pieces in black bags in the basement below them. Marc talked to them throughout the evening. He put his children to bed. He carried on. But Kristina's father felt that something was wrong. He couldn't name it. He just knew. While Marc was distracted putting the girls to sleep, the father slipped away and made his way down to the cellar. He entered the laundry room. He found a black bin bag on the floor. He opened it. Inside, he found his daughter's head, with her hair still attached. He ran from that house screaming into the street. A passerby heard him and called the police. Officers arrived within minutes. At shortly after 8 o'clock on the evening of the 13th of February 2024, Marc Rieben was arrested inside the family home in the presence of his wife's parents. The two children were placed immediately into emergency care, and down in the basement, what was left of Kristina Joksimovic was officially documented by police officers who would later describe what they found in terms that suggested many of them had never seen anything like it. The post-mortem confirmed what the evidence already suggested. Kristina had died of asphyxiation, strangulation, sustained and deliberate. There were ligature marks and fractures around her neck. There were blunt force injuries consistent with the assault while she was still alive. And there were the clumps of hair torn from her scalp, which told investigators something about how terrifying her final moments must have been. Marc's first statement to police was that he had simply found his wife dead. The police did not believe him. 2 days later, at a pre-trial hearing on the 15th of February 2024, he was placed in custody to await trial. He then changed his story entirely, claiming the killing had been an act of self-defense, that Kristina had attacked him with a knife, and that what followed had been an escalation he could not control. He made multiple applications for bail. Every single one was denied.
2 criminal psychologists assessed Marc and concluded that he was fully responsible for his actions. He had narcissistic traits and obsessive-compulsive features, but no disorder that diminished his legal culpability. The defense commissioned a separate forensic psychiatric opinion in an attempt to challenge this, making criminal responsibility a central question of the case for a period of time. The digital evidence recovered from his devices told a clearer story. The anatomy research, the body disposal research, the industrial blender with no prior use, the 10 liters of disinfectant. On the 10th of December 2025, the prosecutor's office filed its indictment, aggravated murder and disturbing the peace of the dead. Both charges carry a maximum sentence of life imprisonment. The trial opened on the 4th of May 2026. The public was excluded from the courtroom given the nature of the evidence. Only accredited journalists were permitted entry, and most of those followed proceedings by video link from a separate room. The case was heard before a 5-judge chamber. Prosecutors described this as one of the cruelest and most harrowing femicides in Swiss legal history. They argued the killing was deliberate and premeditated, driven by what they called crassly egotistical motives, fear of losing his self-image, his children, and the financial consequences of the divorce he refused to accept. The defense argued self-defense. Marc read a statement. He said he had caused his family immeasurable suffering. He said what he had done was absolutely unforgivable. He said not a day passed without despair. He offered Kristina's family 100 Swiss francs as a gesture of remorse. 100 francs. Kristina's family's lawyer described that offer as tactical. Kristina's mother's statement was read to the court. She said she was a mother who had lost her daughter, whose grandchildren missed their mummy every single day, who was brutally torn from life just 1 month after she tried to forge a new path for her children and herself. She said no verdict could bring her daughter back, but it could show that her life mattered. The eldest daughter's words were also relayed to the chamber through the family's lawyer. She said she was sad because her mother was dead, and she said her father had lied to her. On Wednesday, the 13th of May, 2026, exactly 2 years and 2 months after the murder, the 5-judge chamber delivered its judgment. Marc Rieben was found guilty of aggravated murder and disturbing the peace of the dead. When the verdict was read, Kristina's father, the man who had found her head in a black bin bag in the basement, wept openly in the courtroom. Marc's parents rose from the public benches, crossed the room, and embraced his son before he was led away. Marc remains in security detention. The 2 daughters are currently in the care of Kristina's parents, who are pursuing permanent custody. A competing application has reportedly been filed by Marc's family. Kristina Joksimovic spent years teaching women how to walk into a room and command it, how to hold their heads up, how to move with confidence and purpose. She spent her final months trying to find a way out of a marriage that had slowly become a prison, recording conversations out of fear, building a legal case, trying to secure enough financial support to keep her daughters close while she started over. She never got that chance. And the manner in which she was taken from this world, the brutality of it, the methodical destruction of her body, the fact that her parents sat at a dinner table directly above her remains and were served food by the man responsible, is something that cannot be softened by careful language or clinical distance. What we can say is this: she was loved, she mattered, and she deserves to be remembered as more than the worst thing that ever happened to her. For Kristina. Subscribe to Cold Tape Stories so you never miss a case, and drop your thoughts in the comments. What do you make of this verdict? I want to hear from you. for Kristina Joksimović. Rest in peace.